Meet Christiana Figueres. After 6 years as Executive Secretary of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, she is now a founding partner of Global Optimism, which works for social and environmental change by shifting pessimism to optimism.
Wonderful to have you here, Christiana Figueres. You have our full attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on what part of this wonderful globe you are joining us from. I am truly grateful for this initiative of We Don't Have Time, because what it is doing is reminding everyone that we truly do not have any more time. We have run out of time. Had we started on climate change action, reducing our emissions in a timely fashion 20, 30 years ago, we would have the luxury of time now, but we didn't. And therefore, we have run out of time. Science is very clear that this decade that we have already started, and we're already 9 months into it, is actually what science calls the decisive decade. Not the decisive decade of maybe this century. No, this is the decisive decade of the history of humankind. And that sounds like an exaggeration, but it's not, because actually it is within this decade, by 2030, that we collectively will determine whether we are reaching the intermediate goalposts of addressing climate change or not. And here are the two choices. By 2030, the end of this decade, if we continue with our current business as usual level of greenhouse gas emissions, we will, by 2030, have condemned ourselves, our children, and all generations beyond that to a world that will be on a path of constant and increasing destruction and untold, unfathomable human misery. However, if we actually realize that we can reduce our emissions right now, and certainly over the next 10 years, and if we get to 2030, having achieved a cut of 50% of our emissions globally, but that also means each of us individually, by city, by community, by country, by corporation, by sector, if we can all do that, then we will actually open the door to a world that is not just a good world, it's a world that is much better than the world that we're in right now, because it would be a world in which we have basically gotten rid of urban pollution, and we can avoid the 7 million deaths that are premature deaths now because of air pollution. It will be a world in which cities are green and have a lot of space for pedestrians to exercise, to walk, to enjoy urban life. It will be a world in which cities will be producing much of their own food, will be producing much of their own energy, because all buildings will practically be energy self-generating, will produce all the energy that they need. It will be a world in which we transport ourselves through services, transport services that are efficient and clean. It will be a world in which we have provided electricity to the 800 million people around the world who still do not have electricity, and therefore are at the bottom of the pyramid and very likely under the threshold of poverty. So it is a much better world. And what we have to do to get there is first to halve our emissions by 2030. It is entirely possible to do that. Now, that is why science and all of us are calling this the decisive decade, because it is in this decade that we will, without any exaggeration, decide the future of human presence on this planet. Yes, we're deciding the future of the planet, but let's be honest, the planet has been around for 4.5 billion years. She will continue to be around, even if we don't have the brains to continue to protect and promote the soft spot of natural conditions that allow us to thrive and propagate as human race here on this earth. So this is not about saving the planet. This is about saving, preserving, and regenerating the conditions that are conducive to human life and to human prosperity on this planet. The decisive decade. Now, the exciting thing about this decisive decade is that while we have run out of time, while we don't have any more time, we do have the technologies that help us make up for the fact that we lost time in the past. That is a very important realization. If we stood here now on the brink of this crossroads that I have described and didn't have the technologies at hand, we would be in a very difficult situation. But we do have the technologies. We have the technologies in energy generation, most of them. We will still develop some, but we have especially the technologies of digitalization and AI that, as the little video or the voiceover that you heard at the beginning, allows us to completely revolutionize transport, energy generation and distribution, heating and cooling, lighting, all the hard to abate sectors. Those are the technologies that are at hand right now, which allow us to generate and deploy energy efficiently. Think of carbon constraint, which we're facing right now, as carbon inefficiency. Think of carbon reductions and emission reductions as efficiency, carbon efficiency. That is why we have a group of technology companies such as Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Apple, many that produce technologies and use technologies that are together or separately, individually, but in collaboration with each other, stepping up to the task of putting their products and services at the service of all companies in all sectors who are committed to decarbonizing their industry. We also have a group of step-up companies, 21 companies, technology companies, that are decided to ensure that the world gets to net zero by 2050 and to halving emissions by 2030. So my friends, we don't have time, but we're in the decisive decade. We have the technologies that can allow us to get to the end post of the decisive decade. All we need now is the decisive determination to make it happen on time. Thanks.